history of the ancient world is not merely a list of dates and names. It is a vast, millennia-long experiment. More time passed between the invention of the first stone tools and the emergence of writing than has passed between the construction of the Egyptian pyramids and our own era. Step by step, humanity learned to master nature, build settlements, unite into societies, and create states. How exactly did this happen? Why did different regions develop so differently? And how did hunting and gathering gradually evolve into cities, laws, and the first religions? Good evening, dear friends. You're on the official channel for Bedtime History Lectures, a space where dreams become knowledge, guided by this very voice through the night. Tonight, we'll journey together through the entire span of ancient history in just 2.5 hours. We'll begin in the Paleolithic era, the age of hunters and the first campsites. We'll move into the Neolithic, where agriculture and settled life emerged. Then we'll explore the civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. We'll trace the rise of cities, writing, and law, and conclude with the Roman Empire, its golden age, its crisis, and its fall. Thank you for your warmth and support in the comments. They help create new lectures and grow this project. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes. Before you lies the full story of the ancient world, from the first stones to the first books. Human history begins in the deepest antiquity, in an era we call the Paleolithic, literally, the Old Stone Age. It spans an immense period, from the appearance of the first tools about 2.5 million years ago to the end of the last ice age around 10,000 BCE. The Paleolithic was a time of slow but decisive steps in human development. The earliest tools were crudely flaked stones, used to chop branches or butcher animal carcasses. Archaeologists call these early tools choppers, and they've been found in places like the famous Olduvai Gorge in Africa. Over time, humans learned to craft more refined and specialized instruments: scrapers, knives, and spear points. It was during the Paleolithic that humans first mastered fire, one of history's turning points. Fire not only provided warmth and protection from predators, but also allowed meat to be cooked, making it easier to digest and gradually altering human physiology. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths hundreds of thousands of years old, such as those at Zhoukoudian in China. Eventually, Paleolithic people began forming more complex communities. They lived in kinship groups, hunted together, and shared food. Their lives were harsh, but it was during this time that the first forms of culture were born. The most astonishing legacy of the Paleolithic is cave art. In the caves of Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, stunning paintings of bison, deer, and horses have survived, rendered with remarkable precision, using shading, proportion, and motion. These images prove that early humans possessed vivid imaginations and a desire to understand the world not just through action, but through symbols. Scholars debate the purpose of these paintings. Were they part of hunting rituals, magical practices, or simply attempts to beautify the home? Whatever the reason, they mark humanity's first steps toward symbolic thought and art. By the end of the Paleolithic, the first inklings of spiritual belief appeared. Archaeologists have found burials where bodies were carefully positioned, surrounded by ornaments or everyday objects, suggesting that people already pondered death and possibly believed in an afterlife. Around 12,000 years ago, the glaciers began to retreat. The Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, transitional period between the harsh ice age and a gentler climate, mammoths and woolly rhinos vanished, forcing hunters to find new survival strategies. The Mesolithic's greatest invention was the bow and arrow, which revolutionized hunting by allowing prey to be struck from a distance, increasing mobility and efficiency. Small flint arrowheads appeared, along with the first canoes, fishing nets, and hooks. Fishing and foraging supplemented hunting, diversifying the diet. It was also during this era that dogs became humanity as first domesticated companion. Skeletal remains of dogs have been found alongside human dwellings. The Mesolithic was a time of experimentation. People tested new subsistence methods and adapted to changing environments. They began building more permanent shelters, using bones and wood frames covered with hides. Then, around 10,000 BCE, an era began that changed everything. The Neolithic, or New Stone Age, while the Paleolithic and Mesolithic were ages of hunters and gatherers. The Neolithic was the age of farmers. In the Fertile Crescent, the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Levant, Palestine, and Anatolia, people began cultivating wild grains like wheat and barley. They also domesticated sheep, goats, and pigs. This transformation was so profound, it's called the Neolithic Revolution. Humans were no longer entirely dependent on foraging. They could now produce their own food, store surpluses, and plan for the future. Permanent settlements emerged. One of the most famous is Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, home to thousands of people by 7000 BCE, with mud brick houses, painted walls, and ceremonial spaces. Another early center was Jericho, where by 8000 BCE, massive walls and a tower already stood, evidence of organized labor and social coordination. With settled life came crafts. People began making pottery to store grain and water, fired in kilns and decorated with patterns. The first steps of decorative art. New social relations developed. Land ownership and food reserves became valuable. Division of labor emerged. Some farmed, others crafted, while others defended the community. Trade began to take shape. The Neolithic Revolution transformed human thought. Life was no longer an endless search for food. It became a time to build, store, plan, and pass knowledge to future generations. This laid the foundation for all future civilizations. After the Neolithic Revolution, human settlements grew larger and exchange intensified. Eventually, population, knowledge, and resources reached a critical mass, ushering in what we call civilization. The first such civilization was that of the Sumerians, who lived in southern Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, often called the cradle of civilization. By the 4th millennium BCE, true cities arose. The greatest was Uruk, home to as many as 50,000 people, surrounded by walls filled with homes, temples, and markets. This era is known as the Uruk period. The Sumerians gave humanity its first writing system, cuneiform, developed around 3300 BCE. It began as simple pictograms for accounting grain, livestock, and goods, but evolved into a full script used for laws, myths, and official documents. History was no longer just memory. It became text. They also invented the wheel. Depictions of wheeled carts appear by 3000 BCE, revolutionizing transport, trade, and warfare. They built monumental structures from clay and brick, ziggurats, stepped temple towers that dominated city skylines. The most famous, the Ziggurat of Ur, symbolized both religious devotion and communal power. Sumerian society was governed by priest kings, who bridged the divine and the earthly. They believed the gods controlled everything, from river floods to harvests. Among notable figures was Enheduanna, a priestess and poet, daughter of Sargon of Akkad. Her hymns to the goddess Inanna are the earliest known literary works signed by a specific author, proof that personal poetry existed 4,000 years ago. The Sumerians also created some of the first legal codes, such as the Code of Ur-Nammu, 21st century BCE, which preceded Hammurabi's laws. These regulated property disputes, theft, and social relations, among humanity's first steps toward the rule of law. Though often at war with each other, Sumerian cities traded widely, with regions as distant as India and Persia, importing stone and metal, and exporting grain, wool, and pottery. Sumer's legacy endures. We still use their base 60 numerical system, 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a circle. They turned communities into cities, bookkeeping into writing, and ritual into literature. They laid the foundations of civilization itself. If Sumer gave the world cities and writing, Egypt became a symbol of stability and grandeur. It arose in the Nile Valley, where annual floods turned arid land into fertile green. Thanks to the Nile, Egyptians could reliably grow crops and thus build homes, organize communities, and think beyond mere survival. Villages along the Nile appeared as early as the 6th or 5th millennia BCE. People farmed with hoes, grew barley and wheat, and raised goats and sheep. By the 4th millennium BCE, these villages coalesced into two major centers, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. Around 3000 BCE, a pivotal event occurred, unification under King Narmer, later called Men's. The Narmer ballad shows him wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, the first image of a united kingdom. From this moment, ancient Egypt began its 3,000-year journey as a civilization. Unlike the rivalrous Sumerian city-states, Egypt was centralized from the start. The pharaoh was not just a king, but a living god, the guarantor of Ma'at, the divine order of justice, balance, and cosmos. Each pyramid was part of a vast complex. Temples, causeways, statues. Khafra's pyramid includes the Great Sphinx, a lion's body with a human head, symbolizing royal power and mystery. The Old Kingdom also saw the rise of hieroglyphic writing, art, and literature. The pyramid texts, sacred spells carved into tomb walls, were the first religious writings meant to ensure the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Egyptians believed the afterlife was a continuation of earthly existence. To reach it, one needed a preserved body, mummification, grave goods, and proper rituals. For pharaohs, the pyramid was an eternal home for the immortal soul. The economy rested on agriculture. The state collected grain taxes, stored surpluses, and used them to fund armies, priests, and massive building projects. But by the 22nd century BCE, the Old Kingdom declined. Central authority weakened. Regional governors, nomarchs, grew powerful. Droughts and poor harvests deepened the crisis. The first intermediate period followed, a time of fragmentation and conflict. Yet the Old Kingdom's legacy endured. The pharaoh's godhood, pyramids, the afterlife cult, and writing became Egypt's eternal trademarks. Eventually, Egypt reunited under the Middle Kingdom, c. 2055 to 1650 BCE, often called a golden age of stability. The capital moved to Thebes, where the god Amun rose to prominence. Pharaohs were now portrayed not just as divine, but as earthly shepherds, wise rulers who cared for their people. Literature reflected this. Royal inscriptions now spoke of duty, and compassion. Irrigation projects expanded farmland. Trade flourished with Nubia to the south and the mysterious land of Punt, source of incense, ivory, and exotic woods. Art became more realistic. Statues of pharaohs like Senusret II showed aged, weary faces, emphasizing the ruler's burden. But stability didn't last. Around 1650 BCE, foreign invaders, the Hyksos, seized northern Egypt. They brought horse-drawn chariots and composite bows, overwhelming the Egyptian army. Yet this crisis sparked renewal. The Theban pharaohs adopted Hyksos military technology, and under Ahmose the Firmer, expelled the invaders, launching the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom, c. 1550-1070 BCE, was Egypt's imperial age. Pharaohs like Thutmose III, Napoleon of the ancient world, expanded Egypt's borders into Syria and Nubia, creating a true empire. Then came Akhenaten, a revolutionary pharaoh who abandoned Egypt as polytheism and promoted worship of a single god, Aten, the sun disk. He built a new capital, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and introduced a new naturalistic art style, showing him with his wife Nefertiti and children in intimate family scenes. But after his death, traditional religion was restored. His monuments were defaced and his name erased, though his legacy lived on through his probable son, Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered nearly intact in 1922, dazzled the world with its golden mask and treasures, making him the most famous pharaoh in modern eyes. Later, Ramses II the Great ruled for 67 years, leaving behind colossal temples like Abu Simbel and signing history's first known peace treaty with the Hittites after the Battle of Kadesh. The New Kingdom was also a time of religious depth and artistic mastery. Pharaohs were buried in hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, their walls covered in vivid paintings of the afterlife journey. Yet by 1070 BCE, Egypt weakened. Invasions by the enigmatic Sea Peoples, internal strife, and priestly power led to the Third Intermediate Period. Egypt would never again be the mighty empire of Ramses' day, but its cultural legacy was secure. While Egypt and Mesopotamia are well known, another great civilization flourished in the Indus Valley, modern Pakistan, and northwest India. The Harappan, or Indus civilization, c. 2600-1900 BCE. It spanned over 1 million square kilometers and supported 5 million people, rivaling Egypt and Sumer combined. Its cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were marvels of urban planning, grid-patterned streets at right angles, standardized baked bricks, advanced sanitation. Nearly every house had a well, bathing area, and drainage system, a level of hygiene Europe wouldn't match for millennia. At the city center stood the Great Bath, a watertight brick pool likely used for ritual purification. Yet their writing remains undeciphered. Short inscriptions on seals use unknown symbols, possibly a logosyllabic script. Without readable texts, their religion and governance remain mysterious. Archaeology suggests worship of mother goddesses and animal deities, perhaps early roots of Hinduism. Their economy thrived on wheat, barley, and cotton. They were the first, though legendary. These figures shaped China's cultural identity. Historically, the Xia dynasty, c. 1900-1500 BCE, may correspond to the early Tao culture, with bronze workshops, palaces, and canals. But the first confirmed dynasty is the Shang, c. 1600-1046 BCE, with oracle bones, cities, and writing. Thus, China's story began in myth, but its roots were real. If Sumer was the first civilization, and Egypt the symbol of stability, Babylon became the embodiment of Its greatest ruler, Hammurabi, R. 1792-1750 BCE, conquered Mesopotamia and created the Code of Hammurabi, the oldest nearly complete legal code. Engraved on a 2.25-meter diorite stele, now in the Louvre, it contains 282 laws covering trade, marriage, inheritance, and crime. It introduced the principle of an eye for an eye, though punishments varied by social class. Hammurabi declared, to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak. His code reinforced royal authority as the guardian of justice, a revolutionary idea. Though Babylon later declined, its legal tradition endured, becoming a model for future societies. While Babylon championed law, Assyria embodied military might. From their heartland on the Tigris River, the Assyrians built history's first professional army. They pioneered iron weapons stronger than bronze, cavalry and chariots, siege engines, battering rams, siege towers, psychological warfare, mass deportations, public executions. Assyrian kings like Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal ruled a vast empire from Egypt to Iran. Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh preserved thousands of clay tablets, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, saving Mesopotamian literature for posterity. But their empire rested on fear, not loyalty. In 612 BCE, a coalition of Medes and Babylonians destroyed Nineveh, and Assyria vanished. Yet their legacy endured in military tactics, administration, and archaeology. Other powers shaped the ancient Near East. The Hittites of Anatolia, early masters of ironworking, who fought Egypt at Kadesh and later signed a peace treaty. The first in recorded history, the Mitanni, famed for their horse training and chariot warfare, who influenced regional politics through diplomacy. These kingdoms show that the ancient world was multipolar, with technology, trade, and ideas flowing between empires. On the eastern Mediterranean coast, the Phoenicians, not a nation, but a network of city-states, Tyre, Sidon, Pisblos, became the great mariners and merchants of antiquity. Their cedar wood and purple dye, from murex snails, were prized luxuries. They sailed as far as Britain and West Africa, founding colonies like Carthage. But their greatest gift was the alphabet, C, 1050 BCE, with just 22 consonantal signs. It was simple enough for merchants to learn. It spread to Greece, where vowels were added, becoming the ancestor of Latin, Cyrillic, and our modern scripts. Phoenician religion centered on gods like Baal and Tanit, with rituals that included child sacrifice, evidenced by Tophids in Carthage. Their legacy, global trade, urban colonies, and the alphabet, the foundation of written communication. Parallel to the Phoenicians, the ancient Israelites shaped history through spiritual ideas. The earliest non-biblical mention of Israel appears on the Merneptah stele, c. 1208 BCE. Archaeology reveals small agrarian villages in the Canaanite highlands. Simple stone houses, no palaces or temples. By the 10th century BCE, tradition speaks of a united monarchy under Saul, David, and Solomon, with Jerusalem as its center and Solomon's temple as its spiritual heart. Israelite religion evolved from monolatry, worship of one God among many, to strict monotheism. Central to it was the covenant, a sacred bond between Yahweh and the people, codified in the Torah. This law governed not just ritual, but ethics, care for the poor, justice for strangers, and the Sabbath rest. After the Assyrians destroyed Israel, 722 BCE, and the Babylonians destroyed Judah. 386 BCE, the Babylonian exile transformed Judaism. Without a temple, focus shifted to text, prayer, and community. The Hebrew Bible took shape. Monotheism crystallized when Cyrus the Great of Persia allowed the Jews to return. 539 BCE, they rebuilt the Second Temple. But the diaspora had begun. Judaism became a religion of both land and dispersion. Its legacy, ethical monotheism. Around 1200 BCE, a system's collapse engulfed the eastern Mediterranean. Mycenaean palaces burned, Hittite cities fell, Egypt struggled against the Sea Peoples. The Greek Dark Ages followed, writing vanished, cities declined. But from these ashes, classical Greece would rise. After Assyria's fall, Babylon rose again under Nebuchadnezzar II. 605-562 BCE, he rebuilt Babylon into a magnificent city of 200,000 people, with massive walls wide enough for chariots, the Ishtar Gate adorned with glazed lions, the Ziggurat at Anunnaki, possibly the Tower of Babel, the legendary Hanging Gardens, though their existence is debated. Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem, 586 BCE, destroyed the temple, and exiled the Jews, triggering the Babylonian captivity. Babylon also excelled in astronomy, creating star catalogs and eclipse predictions that influenced later Greek science. But in 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia captured Babylon without a fight, earning praise for his tolerance. The Persian Empire, 550-330 BCE, was the first to unite Egypt, India, and Anatolia under one rule. Founded by Cyrus the Great, it was governed with remarkable tolerance. Local customs and religions were respected. The Cyrus Cylinder, often called the first human rights charter, proclaims a freedom for deported peoples. Under Darius Thermers, R. 522-486 BCE, Persia was organized into satrapies, provinces, connected by the royal road and stabilized by the Daric gold coin. Religiously, Persia fostered Zoroastrianism, a dualistic faith of Ahura Mazda, good, versus Angra Mainyu, evil, which influenced Jewish, Christian, and Islamic concepts of heaven, hell, and judgment. But Persia clashed with Greece, defeated at Marathon 490 BCE, and Salamis 480 BCE. It never conquered the Greek city-states, yet the empire endured until Alexander the Great crushed it in a series of lightning campaigns. 334-330 BCE. Carthage, founded by Phoenician exiles, traditionally by Queen Dido, became Rome's greatest rival. Carthage means new city in Phoenician, a maritime and commercial power. It controlled the trade from Spain to Sicily, using naval might and a network of colonies. Its army relied on mercenaries, Numidians, Iberians, Gauls, led by brilliant generals like Hannibal. Carthage's republican government featured elected suffets, judges, a council of elders, and a popular assembly. But its rivalry with Rome led to the Punic Wars. First Punic War, 264-241 BCE. Rome gains Sicily. Second Punic War, 218-201 BCE. Hannibal crosses the Alps, wins at Cannae, but is defeated at Zama by Scipio Africanus. Third Punic War, 149-146 BCE. Carthage is destroyed utterly by Rome, yet its legacy endured in trade networks, urban planning, and the Punic language. Alexander the Great, 356-323 BCE, changed the world in just 13 years, tutored by Aristotle, heir to Philip II of Macedon. He crossed into Asia in 334 BCE. He defeated Persia at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, then conquered Egypt, where he was hailed as son of Amun, Mesopotamia, and Persia. He founded Alexandria in Egypt and pushed into India, defeating King Porus at the Hydaspes River, 326 BCE. But his exhausted army refused to go farther. On the return march through the Gadrosian desert, many died. In Babylon, Alexander planned new campaigns, but died suddenly at 32, possibly of fever or poisoning. His empire fractured among his generals, Theodochi, but his true legacy was Hellenism. Greek became the lingua franca from Egypt to India. Cities like Antioch and Alexandria blended Greek and Eastern cultures. Science, art, and philosophy flourished in this new cosmopolitan world. Alexander's conquests paved the way for Rome, and later Christianity. Rome began as a village on the Palatine Hill, traditionally founded by Romulus in 753 BCE. After expelling their Etruscan kings in 509 BCE, Romans established a republic, a complex system of consuls, senate, and assemblies designed to prevent tyranny. Over centuries, Rome conquered Italy, then the Mediterranean, defeating Carthage in the Punic Wars and absorbing Greece and Asia Minor. The Roman legion, disciplined, flexible, and citizen-based, was key to its success. But empire brought problems. Wealth concentrated in the hands of a few small farmers. Ruin replaced by slave-run estates, latifundia. Urban poor dependent on state grain. Political violence, e.g., the Gracchi brothers assassinated. Generals like Marius and Sulla used armies to seize power. The first triumvirate, Pompey, Crassus, Caesar, collapsed into civil war. In 49 BCE, Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, defeated Pompey, and became dictator, only to be assassinated in 44. Diocletian, R. 284-305 CE, saved the empire by dividing it into east and west, the Tetrarchy, rule by 4, reorganizing provinces and tax collection, attempting price controls, the edict on maximum prices, launching the last great persecution of Christians, 303 CE. He voluntarily abdicated, a rarity, and retired to grow cabbages in Split, Croatia. His successor, Constantine the Great, R. 337 CE, changed history, legalized Christianity via the Edict of Milan, 303 CE, allegedly saw a vision of the cross before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, 312 CE, founded Constantinople, 330 CE, as a new Christian capital, issued the solidus, a stable gold coin used for centuries. Under Constantine, the empire became absolutist, Christian, and bureaucratic. The Western Roman Empire slowly crumbled. By the 5th century CE, barbarian kingdoms ruled Gaul, Spain, and Africa. In 476 CE, the Germanic general Odoacer deposed the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, and sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople. The Western Empire ended, though the Eastern Byzantine Empire lived on for another 1,000 years. One of its greatest rulers was Justinian III, 527-565 CE. He sought to restore the Roman Empire. He codified Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, the foundation of European legal systems, built the Hagia Sophia, a masterpiece of architecture, sent Belisarius to reconquer North Africa from the Vandals, and Italy from the Ostrogoths. But plague, war, and financial strain prevented lasting success. Still, Justinian's legacy endured in law, architecture, and the dream of Roman unity. As we look back across millennia, from Paleolithic caves to the fall of Rome, we see not just events, but humanity's grand journey. Each civilization contributed uniquely. Sumer, cities, writing, law; Egypt, eternity, divine kingship, monumental architecture; Indus, urban planning, hygiene, trade; China, bureaucracy, philosophy, statecraft; Phoenicia, alphabet, seafaring, commerce; Israel, ethical monotheism; Greece, reason, democracy, art; Rome, law, engineering, empire. Though empires fell, their ideas survived. Our alphabet comes from Phoenician merchants. Our laws echo Roman jurisprudence. Our calendar, language, and political terms, democracy, republic, stem from antiquity. Our moral ideals, justice, compassion, trace back to prophets and philosophers. The ancient world is not truly gone. It lives in our words, our cities, our laws, and our dreams. So as you drift to sleep, imagine the flicker of a Paleolithic fire, the silence of a desert pyramid, the roar of the Colosseum, the quiet wisdom of a Greek philosopher. You carry their legacy within you. Good night.